En un mundo donde pocos se atreven a sumergirse hacia las profundidades de su propio ser, es enriquecedor escuchar a aquellos que ya han emprendido ese viaje. Yo soy Lupita García y en el podcast El Gigante que Emerge, mis invitados te inspirarán con sus historias de transformación y crecimiento personal. Prepárate para escuchar, cuestionar y emerger de tu mundo como un gigante imparable. Hola gigantes, bienvenidas y bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio más de esto que es El Gigante que Emerge. Recuerden que ya estamos en video en la segunda temporada y si no nos han escuchado en nuestro prólogo, en nuestro video inicial, arrancamos precisamente con una campaña #Pasos de Gigante. Así que no olviden asegurarse de seguirnos y continuar con esa campaña donde los estaremos esperando a todos y a todas. El día de hoy estoy muy contenta porque con ustedes tenemos a una gran invitada. Ya saben ustedes que aquí en El Gigante que Emerge estamos invitando a personas extraordinarias con historias transformadoras y la historia de hoy no es la excepción. Y hoy quiero que conozcan a una persona muy especial para mí, a una persona a quien puedo llamar amiga y que por esta única ocasión vamos a llevar a cabo el episodio en inglés porque hoy quiero presentarles a mi querida amiga Robin. Robin, bienvenida, ¿cómo estás?
Bien. Oh, very good. Thank you, Lupita. I'm good.
Great. I am so happy to have you here with us today, Robin. So if you can go ahead and introduce very briefly yourself and let us know a little bit about what you do.
Okay.
So our audience can actually get a chance to meet you as well.
Okay. So my name is Robin Goza, and I have lived in Guadalajara now for almost 7 years. Well, 7 years this month, excuse me. So I grew up in Southern California. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers. I am the third. And I am married. I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren that live in the United States. My husband and I, we moved here 7 years ago after we retired. He farmed and ranched in Texas, and I worked for a insurance company, and I was a privacy and data security analyst. And so we live here now. We love Guadalajara. It's been the best 7 years of our life.
Yay! I'm so happy to hear that. And, you know, I actually wanted to share your story, Robin, and I am so honored to have you here with us today because El Gigante que Emerge, it's about, sharing that authenticity and sharing those transformative stories about our lives and how we continue to rise as a giant, right? So, and when I had the opportunity to meet you, I was so blown away with your story and all of what you have been through. And I really do think that your story will be very inspiring for the people that is going to hear us and that is going to listen to us and just hear us out. So thank you very much again for being here, Robin.
Thank you for having
me. So we're going to start, with talking about, to get us into your transformative story, Robin, I want you to tell us about the time when you were struggling, when you were going through your situation. So go ahead and give us a little bit of context on how your story is going to be.
Okay, so growing up in California, I was very, very young the first time that my mom divorced and from my dad. My mom and dad were high school sweethearts, and they married very young, right out of high school. And my sister was 2 years older than I was, and I was probably, it was so long ago, and I was so young. I think I was around 2 or 3 when they divorced.
Wow.
And through that divorce, my mom remarried several times, which is a whole nother story in itself. But When they divorced after my mom remarried a couple different times, and her third husband, he agreed to adopt my sister and I. And I hear different stories from different parts of the family because everybody processes these things differently.
Differently, yes.
So from one side, it's one story from one side, and that doesn't matter to me. I was young. It wasn't because of me. It was just many things. You know what it's like when you go through that divorce.
So how old were you? When
I was 4 at the time.
4 at the time you were adopted by your stepfather.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And which meant that my real father gave up his rights to us.
Okay.
He signed his rights away for this other man to raise us. And so I struggled with that as a child, just knowing who was my real dad. Because of the situation and because of different things, hurts and pain and all that goes along with that divorce, we were not allowed to see our real dad for 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
So we didn't really know who he was. At that young age, you don't really understand.
Yes.
And you don't remember. I couldn't remember what he looked like. I couldn't remember what he was really like as a dad as I got older, and I would try to process that. But something inside me wanted to know him. I really wanted to know him, but I didn't want to disrespect the man who had adopted us, and we called Dad. So.
Wow, and it's really profound what you're sharing right now with us, Robin, because we have heard many stories about adoption. Some parents decide to keep it as a secret. Others, they're like, they don't want to, just throw it out there because it's a very sensitive topic, and it's the lives of other people, that we have in the middle. So how was it for you growing up, like through your years of school and how you got into this journey of, probably speaking about forgiveness? Did you ever get the opportunity to actually meet with your real dad?
Yes, actually we did. About 10 years later, my mom and my stepdad, who is now considered my legal dad, they divorced. We went through a lot. There were a lot of issues, alcoholism and things that were in that picture, and they divorced. And when they did, my sister and I were now teenagers, and we went to our mom and we just basically said, look, we really want to know our real dad. We realized that through those 10 years, we weren't allowed to see him. But now that's over, and we want to see our dad. And so my mom, she said, okay. She knew that we were very serious about that, and it meant a lot to us. So she set that up for us. It's funny because we knew our biological grandparents. My dad's parents, they lived a few blocks from us, and sometimes in the summer we would go and see them, and we called them Grandma and Grandpa, but we knew we weren't allowed to see him, our dad. And they knew that, and they respected that. But they would bring us in and give us ice cream in the summer, and they were wonderful grandparents. And I remember I would ask my grandma, what does my daddy look like? Because I didn't know. And she would always tell me, just look in the mirror. You look just like him. And that was so special to me to know I looked like him. And I do. So when Mom set that up for us to meet him, we got to meet him. He was remarried, and he had two sons. So I had 2 half brothers I didn't know. And they were in elementary or maybe secondary school. So we got to establish this new relationship with these brothers and with our real dad. And it was such a wonderful time for us to just to find out these things and to find out about family members and things we didn't know about. It was almost like an adopted child finding their parents after many years. And so for us, it was great. We had a wonderful relationship. To this day, I have a great relationship with my dad.
That is so great to hear. Yes.
Oh, but I do have a specific time. There was a specific time, and I had dealt with the whole forgiveness of all of that on my own, with the help of God through the years. But after I was already grown, and I had children of my own, and I had already processed all of this, my dad came to visit Greg and I when we were in Texas. And one night we had watched a movie, and I think something did something in him. And we started having this conversation afterwards, and he just broke down and wept, my dad. And it's the first time I'd ever seen him cry. And he just wept, and he finally just said, I am so sorry for that. He said, I get emotional saying it. He said, do you understand? I have lived with the regret of that for my entire life, ever since then. And he asked me for forgiveness at that point. And of course, I had already forgiven him, and I had dealt with that. But it meant something, and it was more of a freedom for him in that moment, too, that he didn't have to keep carrying that weight. And I was able to tell him I forgave him, and it was okay. And so it was a really special time for us where he really we got to heal in that sense.
Wow, that is
It was
so magical, Robin.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's so powerful, you know, and sometimes, as you're mentioning it, when you're young, like, we don't dimension all of the impact that this is causing us. But I
Right.
think that for you to have this closure, I think it was very beautiful and very powerful.
It really was. It really was. Personally, for my own self, though, after I had been, probably in my 20s, early 20s, I had just really learned a lot about what the power of forgiveness was for a person. And I've always heard that holding on to unforgiveness and bitterness is like taking poison and hoping it will kill the other person. It only eats you up inside. It's like a cancer. And so forgiveness is not always for the other person. A lot of times it's for our own self and for our own emotional well-being, and I needed that. And once I was able to forgive my dad and my mom, because I'll be honest, my childhood wasn't happy roses and sunshine. There were some hard times, some very difficult times. We moved a lot. We started over several times. My mom had married 7 times, and so we were constantly, it seemed like we were starting over. But now as an adult and having raised my own children, and you have children, you make mistakes.
Yes, we do.
And you wish you could take them back. And at the moment, you're making the best choice that you can in the moment with the knowledge you have and with the understanding of what right and wrong and good and bad is, and you make that decision. And so I've never faulted my mom for those decisions. She was making decisions based on her own experiences about the best that she knew what to do. And now that I'm an adult and I have children and I've made those same mistakes, some of them, I understand that. And I hope someday my own children forgive me for the things that I did when I was.
That's what we're always wishing. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mom. I already forgave you. Please,
Yes.
children of mine, forgive me as well.
Yes. It's a cycle.
Definitely. And I think that through those cycles, I think that that's where we're growing. That's where what makes us the person that we are. So tell us a little bit about how was your childhood with your stepfather as an adopted child, How was that for you in school and in house with your stepfather? How was your relationship?
It was really very good. He was a good man. He was a very good man. He was very committed, and and he took care of us. He always provided for us. We always had the things that we needed, and he was good. He was a quiet man, but there were very special times I remember with him where I would sit in his recliner with him on Sunday afternoon and watch sports and things like that. But there were hard times too. There were some difficult times especially when the alcohol came in, and he slowly became an alcoholic, and I saw that. We watched it. My sister and I were old enough to understand at that point what was going on, and then to see how that escalated into just a very chaotic and type of house in our home with lots of fighting and things like that. But he was always there for us when we needed something, and we called him Dad. Of course, I was so young in the beginning of that that I didn't have that attitude of, you're not my dad or any of those kinds of things that a lot of kids tend to go through. I just, okay, he's my dad now. I called him Dad. I didn't know any different. So it really changed the dynamic of family for us.
Yeah, your adaptability was really cool.
Well, it's funny because I look back now, and I've processed so much over the years. We go through certain circumstances in our life that make us who we are. And I mean, I'm living in a country, a different culture, a different language, different people. I've left my family back home to come and live here. But part of that is because growing up, I was used to moving. I was used to changing schools. I was used to meeting new friends, and to me, it was always a new adventure. So that has made me part of what I am today, and how I adapt to things today was that.
Definitely. And it's, everything is connected, Robin, precisely because of what we go through. And even though we don't have a name for that situation within that specific time or the moment, but as we grow, and just as you mentioned, those little moments are what define us as people today, and that's when we can put a name, and we put a name in the situation or the moment. That's when we know that we are healing, and because we now see things with a different perspective of how we can continue enhancing ourselves, and how can we be a better version for ourselves and for our sons or kids, and even for the family or the people around us, right? So it's really amazing. It's really fantastic. And share with us about school, Robin. How was school? Because, when we talk about adoption nowadays, it's really harsh.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult. But how was it for you back in your days?
School was fine. Really, it was never a question. It never came up. We didn't really talk about it. He was our dad and he was our mom. We took his name. They literally changed your birth certificate. So I was born Robin Burkhan, but I became Robin Brady. Okay. And that was my maiden name, and that was what was on my birth certificate. To this day, that's on my birth certificate. It was Brady. It was changed. His name was put on there on the birth certificate, everything. So there was never a question. We didn't have to worry about different names or anything. If we didn't tell somebody that he was our adopted father, they would not have known. So it was really no issue. I remember having friends, though, that I would hear that their parents had been married for many years and were still together, and I thought, how strange, because I just thought everybody got divorced. I mean, I just thought that was a normal thing, and I got really callous to that, which was really difficult when I myself got married, to have to really make that adjustment. Is that, no, this is a forever thing. It can be a forever thing. It doesn't have to, end whenever we get tired of the situation. And so that was big for me. But I remember those friends in school, and I would think, wow, your parents are still married?
How is that even possible?
I know.
But it's actually very interesting, Robin, how those type of situations made you curious, made you wonder, and made you, shift your mindset on regards to, so I can stay with someone if I really try to, and if I really want to, it's not just about, getting divorced or getting separated. So that was very, very interesting. So thank you for sharing that with us. And on another side, understanding that you had this adoption process, how do you see adoption nowadays, for example? What do you think about adoption?
I think it's wonderful. I think that there are so many children who don't have families who can be adopted. Those are children who are definitely either orphans or parents are incarcerated, things like that. I think it's wonderful too, if a parent is not wanting to be involved in a person's life, that another one does step up. I think that that's a great thing for a person to take on another person's children and to give them their name. My dad was legally bound to us as far as, like, when they divorced, he had to pay child support. He had to continue visitation with us, just like a natural parent would. And he was good about that. He did. He kept that commitment. He didn't want to just get rid of it. He was committed to that even after the divorce. So I really respected him for that. But I think adoption in those situations is good. I think in some situations it may not be, but everyone is different. Every situation is different. For us, it was a good thing during those years. We didn't always feel that way, but looking back, it was. And we really learned a lot through that. I heard a really great quote once, and I stopped asking. It said, stop asking God, why me? Why am I going through this? Why did it have to happen to me? But instead, change that and say, okay, how can this be redeemed? And I think that's such a better outlook is okay, now how can this be redeemed? Is there somebody who can be helped by this or by my testimony? Is there somebody who now I can as an adult and as a person, even as a leader, I can look and say, I understand what people sometimes have to live with based on other people's decisions.
Yes.
If I make a decision and it's going to impact other people, I need to be conscious of that and aware of that because that's important. Mm-hmm. And we need to realize that many people have to suffer through things that may be good or bad based on another person's decision. And we don't always realize that. And so it's made me more conscious of those things. It's like, my decision is going to affect other people. So.
That's something powerful that you just mentioned, Robin, because it is true, mm-hmm. and we can see it within our, daily routine, mm-hmm. When we're in the traffic, mm-hmm. like I want to go fast. I'm deciding to go fast, mm-hmm. I'm deciding to go quick and I'm not deciding to let someone get in my way, but my decision, I don't even know if it's affecting the other person, Normally it does. Maybe the other person might get mad or whatever, but it's in those little moments and those little times that we actually expand ourselves. Mm-hmm. And right now that you mentioned about making that conscious, I think that that's what we want to invite our audience, with these stories is to, realize and have a different perspective about how we're seeing things, Mm-hmm. Adoption to me is something fantastic. It's mm-hmm. something great, something that we have success stories, Some others, because I do have some friends that, they have gone into adoption. And I actually read an article that it says that when somebody adopts a child, it's actually a pregnancy of the heart.
Wow.
And I thought that was very beautiful, mm-hmm. That, and I don't think it has the visibility of what it's supposed to have, mm-hmm. because as you mentioned, there are several situations where a child can be adopted and everything. But, we have to be very conscious about what are the decisions, how is my decision going to impact the life of other people, right? Mm-hmm. So yes. And so now let's go ahead and jump into your healing process, Robin. So you have shared with us, some insights here and there on regards to how, this transformational moment with your dad and how, he said, I'm sorry and everything. But how was it for you as an adult, like when you were forming your family and, just building up your family, those relationships? How was your relationship with your kids? How they say that family, it's because of the blood, mm-hmm. that we have. But in your case, how do you define family now, knowing this that you went through?
Well, from a very early age, my view of family has been a little non-traditional. Back in those days, too, divorce was a lot bigger, I think, a lot in a family. So for me, though, I have my sister, my older sister is 2 years older than me, and we have the same mom and dad. But we have another sister who is a half-sister. My mom, and the husband that adopted us, mm-hmm. him and mom had a child together, which is my younger sister, Nicole. And then my dad remarried and had 2 boys, so they're half brothers. So I have like full blood, half blood, and then no blood. There. So for me, a family is just defined as who you're with and who you grow with. And I grew my sister, both my sisters and both my brothers. We don't feel like half. We feel like full brothers and sisters. We have relationship. When you have relationship, you become part of a family. I have family here in Mexico that are Mexicans. We have no blood, really, but we're family. I know without a doubt that if anything happened to me or Greg, that they would be at my house immediately. That's what family does. Mm-hmm. And that's not just close friends, but we feel like family. We would be there for each other.
Definitely.
And to me, that's what defines family. And I have seen blood families who don't act at all like family, and they don't even look like family, and I'm sad for them.
Yes.
But there are others who I don't think really it's defined by a blood relationship. I had to go through, I grew up with, like I said, 7 different dad figures in my life, but something was always missing, and that didn't feel like a dad. And oftentimes in our growth, and when we come to a place spiritually that we want to learn and understand about who God is, or whatever your higher power or whatever, you want to know about God, and we tend to view him like we do our earthly father. So I had to overcome that part of mine abandoned me. And will God do the same? And so I had to find my own identity, and I had to find out what father really was and what meant. You can father a child, or you can be a dad, and that's a big difference.
Yes.
And a lot of people who are adopted say that. They say, my biological father, he contributed something to my birth, but my dad was my dad. So that, to me, that represents a relationship, a true relationship. I'm so fortunate that through my life, my real biological father also became my dad, and I call him dad too. Mm-hmm. And so I've had the blessing of 2 dads, but I also have a father who is also my dad, and he will never leave me or forsake me. And he became my true father, and now I'm also a part of another family that I get to be at, a greater family of wonderful people who have the same father. So to me, I guess because of my belief in the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we share the same blood, that blood. And so, yeah, that's family. To me, I have found family everywhere I have lived, and I've lived in a lot of places, but I have always found family.
That is so beautiful for you to share with us today, Robin. It's something very magical that sometimes, and I think that this is your story. For me, it's inviting me to question myself, how do I see family? What is the concept that I have as a family? How have I grown with the concept of a family? Because yes, relationship, sometimes, there's a saying in Spanish, that they say that the family is something, or the friends is the family that you get to pick.
Yes.
So it's like, wow, and we are so fortunate. So how many of us are like open ourselves to actually explore these other concepts of family, and to continue, just growing, learning, exploring, and just, questioning ourselves, like, hey, how open am I to this family concept specifically, right? So thank you for sharing that. So as for what you mentioned, so you did find your healing process through the search of God. That is so beautiful.
Yeah.
And how did that journey started off for you, Robin? Where did you actually feel that you found God? And what is, or how is God in your life today?
Well, so when I was 16, I was really searching for that, for what was really love. What did that mean? I didn't understand, and I'd heard a few things here and there, but my family was not religious. We never went to church. We didn't even own a Bible. There was nothing. On Sundays was just another weekend day. We did our thing. And I remember asking my mom one time about that and why we didn't, and she didn't really give me a good answer for that. So one day I was, just something that I had been pondering, and I was, like I said, 16, and I was at school, and this girl came up to me, and she sat down, and I had I'd kind of been one of the girls that went to parties and liked to, go hang out and stuff, with probably not a good set of friends. And she had been part of this group too. And she came and she sat down next to me one day at lunch, and I said, wow, Christy, I haven't seen you at any parties lately. Where have you been? And she said, I don't really do that anymore. She said, I go to church, and I just don't feel like that's the right thing for me anymore. And I was like, wow. You're like,
what's that?
Church? Yeah. My idea of church was just this huge, cold building that had a big pipe organ, and that's all I knew. But this was back in the 80s, so it was really when this whole spiritual revolution started, and there was just this real down to earth, more not quite so stuffy religious attitude. And so she asked me if I would go with her to this Christian concert, and I said, well, I guess so. I was hoping there would be a party that night, but there wasn't, so I didn't have anything else to do, so of course. And so I went with her, and it's this great concert. It was like contemporary music and fun stuff, and there were young people, and they were having a blast. And I thought, wow, I never knew this was what church was about. I had never really gone. And so it was that night that they gave an opportunity, and they explained about who Jesus was and his sacrifice on the cross for us. And that we could accept that, and he could become our dad. And boy, that resonated with me, really. And I wanted that. I wanted to know what it was to have a loving father, because in that part of my life, there was just nothing but turmoil. Mm-hmm. And my view of dad was not really great at that time. Mm-hmm. And of course, I was a teenager, teenagers get. So from that day on, it's like that was sealed in me. That was just sealed. I was a Christian. I knew there was no going backwards. There was no. It was solid for me. And I kind of became the religious person in my family. My family, who didn't know anything about God, were like, "Oh, Robin, she's gone kind of crazy." But it was that peace, and God just was so good and so loving to me, and just taught me, just through people, through church, through the Bible, just taught me of who he was and his father heart for me, and it was beautiful, and I really understood what love finally meant, and that I knew, because his word says he would never leave me or forsake me, which means I would never be abandoned again. I would never be adopted again. I would never be, I am a child of somebody, and that will be forever. And so that gave me so much peace, and it allowed me to learn that forgiveness. That I didn't need to hold that against my mom or my dad. They made choices, and they obviously had to live with those choices, but I didn't have to live with that. I didn't have to define myself by that. Mm-hmm. I could define myself by another father that was not of this world, mm-hmm. which, we live in a difficult world. We live in a fallen world, and we're all part of it, just trying to find our way through it.
Yes. And to do the best we can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. And apart from that friend and that concert that you found that peace, what other resources or tools you had available for you to continue this healing journey and make you the person that you are today, Robin?
Well, of course, just having children and raising children was a part of understanding what forgiveness was for me. That was a journey in itself, but also just through great friends. I've had great people who cared and invested in my life, which is so important, mm-hmm. is to invest in people's lives. And especially when you see those kids. My friend who took me to that concert, she would come like 10 miles out of her way every Sunday and Wednesday and take me with her to church, because I didn't have a car and she did. And she would take me to church. And we were these two girls. Her family they weren't Christians, they weren't religious or anything. And it was just her and I. Mm-hmm. And these people in this church would see us every week, these two teenage girls coming by ourselves to church. And there were families there, but they would see us and they would invite us to come to lunch with them after church, or to come to their house and have lunch. And that was to me, that was just such a loving thing for them to do for us. But it was people like that who invested into our lives. I also had the opportunity right out of high school to go into a mission organization, and we did mercy relief. We took food and clothing and building materials to different countries. And there were wonderful, really mature, strong Christians who really poured into my life and taught me things that I never knew or understand. So It's been really great to have had that opportunity. God places people in our lives.
Definitely.
For that reason.
Definitely.
And I can look back now and I can see where God never left me. And he always put people into my life that poured into me, and I want to do the same for others.
Great. That's really beautiful. So what would you recommend, or what advice would you give to someone who knows that has been adopted, or that is in the process of adopting, to the parents and to the children? Because sometimes, that's a conversation that we don't normally say or we don't normally talk about. But what would be an advice that you would recommend them, or that you know, some words of wisdom for them to find peace or...
My best advice is to remember that first of all, every situation is individual, and not to blame people for decisions that they've made based on what they felt was right at the time and in the moment, and not to judge that, and to find your own identity, to find your true identity of who you are outside of a human person here on this earth, because there is something inside of us that longs to be free, and that's an identity that we have that sometimes I just feel like we can only find in Christ. And until I found that, I found my identity with people and my parents or my spouse or my children, and I couldn't do that. There was so much freedom when I found that for myself, and that's my advice, is go on a journey to find your true identity and who you are. It's not in a dad or a stepdad or any other family combination like that. I have friends and I know people who, when they lose someone, it's like their whole life is gone. Their identity, everything is gone because it's in that person.
Yes.
And that's not a good place to be in. We have to be willing to know that we have seasons, and when the season is over, it's over. But I'm still the same person.
Yes. And that we're not defined by another person, you know. And
Exactly.
I think that that's a very strong advice that you give, you know, that we have to continue searching what is our purpose. Why are we here?
Exactly.
And yes, we may have this situation or that decision has been taken, or this person has been gone away, either a spouse, either a friend, either a partner, either my mom, my dad, but I'm still here. I'm still me.
Right.
So thank you for sharing that, Robin. So we're about to finalize, and I do have a surprise question for you.
Okay.
Hopefully it's not a surprise question, but a little bit, yes. So now that you know all of this, Robin, and that you are in a better place right now because of all what you went through and how you grew up and having Christ in your heart and everything, what would you tell your younger self, you know, your maybe 12, 13, 14-year-old self today?
I would tell myself, first of all, lean on the Father, the true Father. Regardless of who is in your life, you lean on God, because He is there. There were times before I ever knew Him, before I ever even thought that was possible, I can look back in my life and I can see where He was there. And I would tell myself, lean on Him. But I would also tell myself that this is not something that situation you'll be in for the rest of your life, and you don't have to become how you grew up. And I think a lot of people feel like they are just in this place and they can't ever rise above that. And that's a part of, I think, what your whole goal is here, is that we all understand we can rise above those situations. I don't have to fall into the same path that my mom did, and I respect and love my mom very much. I'm not saying that in a bad or disrespectful way. My mom and I have a wonderful relationship. But I don't have to fall into that same pattern. And we can break those chains, those family curses, or those family paths that we tend to keep going on over and over again. Sometimes don't do that. Rise above that. Live right and live truth.
Beautiful. Beautifully said, Robin. So now for the people that are listening to us or seeing us, you know, if they would love to keep this conversation going on with you, is there an email or your social networks that you can share with them, or where can they find you, Robin?
Well, I'm not really big on social network. My husband and I we do share a Facebook page. It's Greg, Robin, Brady, Goza, and you are always welcome to reach out on Facebook or Messenger there. Usually, that my husband manages most of that page. I'm on Instagram, Robin. I think it's Robin Goza 123. I'm not very original, am I?
But you know what? Your last name is very original. So Robin Goza, you're going to find it. Goza with a Z. So that's going to be easy to find.
Yes.
And also, you are part of a group, right? Of Radiante.
Yes. Our church here in Guadalajara is called Iglesia Radiante, and we meet on Sundays, and we are in the south part of the city, towards off Lopez Mateos, way towards Santa Anita, Bosques de Santa Anita, and it's not an English-speaking church; it's all Spanish.
That's where Robin is practicing her Spanish.
Oh, every Sunday.
Great, Robin. Well, thank you very much, Robin, for opening your heart with us today, and thank you for sharing it with everyone. You took the time to listen to us. Thank you very much for sharing this special time and special moment with Robin, and thank you for letting us know in a much greater word, place, space, who Robin is and the purpose that you're here today. So I am so grateful for your story, and thank you for sharing it. Is there any last remarks that you would like to share with the people that is hearing us, seeing us?
No, just remember that forgiveness is a choice, and forgiveness is something that is for our healing, and don't forget to love, just to love people. You know, forgiveness is our love.
Yes,
for each other.
Self-love starts with us. Definitely.
It's healing.
Yes.
It's so healing.
Indeed. Great.
Thank
you very much, Robin. I'm going to go back to Spanish. But before I go back to Spanish, though, Robin, so you are aware of our fantastic campaign that we have for this season 2 of El Gigante que Emerge, which is hashtag Pasos de Gigante. And before we actually go out, because this is something that an invitation for all of our audience that is seeing us, hearing us, you know, we want to hear about what are the Pasos de Gigante that people is doing or that they plan to do for this year. So what is your giant step for this year?
I think for me, mostly it is, I want to be able to step out in boldness, more boldness in my life. I'm typically a shy kind of person, so I really want to step out in more in boldness and share my story or share my testimony and with people who need to hear. I want to be able to be more approachable and just share that with people here in the city and wherever I am. I want to have more boldness.
Well, I think you already took your first step.
Yes, this was a big one.
By coming in with us today. So we highly and truly appreciate you, and we appreciate your time, and very happy for you and to meet you right now, Robin, and to have you as a friend, as a family. So thank you very much. I am so grateful. So now I'm going to go back to Spanish. Y ahora sí, gigantes, pues el día de hoy cerramos este episodio con esta historia transformadora de nuestra querida invitada Robin, esperando que pueda resonar en sus corazones, que pueda ser algo que pueda invitarlos a la inspiración y a la reflexión. Y no olviden seguirnos en nuestras redes. Recuerden que nos encuentran en TikTok, en Instagram, en Facebook. No olviden suscribirse en YouTube. Ahí es donde pueden encontrar el episodio completo. Y síganos, compartan la información, activen la campanita de notificación. Y bien importante, recuerden nuestra campaña para esta segunda temporada, hashtag Pasos de Gigante. ¿Cuál es tu paso de gigante que vas a dar este año? Compártelo con nosotros, nos encantaría leerte, estamos juntos en esto. Porque recuerda que no es la velocidad, sino la dirección y el enfoque hacia donde vas. Da ese paso, porque sin acción no hay transformación. Muchas gracias, gigantes. Nos vemos hasta la próxima.